Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jake Ranson. Welcome to Futurecast. We have an excellent episode for you tonight. Kind of improvising with the setup here. The lighting is terrible. Okay, I'll be the first to admit that. The lighting is really bad, and this microphone isn't even plugged into the camera. So, we're working things out. I think we're still in the testing phase. We're still working out how to properly run this show. But yeah, this is Futurecast, and I really had to get on here and just ramble about some stuff. And this has been on my mind for a little while. And actually, I'll take you back to last month. I want to talk about a conference that I attended a month ago in September. It's October now. It's actually getting close to around the exact day a month ago that I attended this conference. In case you don't know, there was this sort of conservative, right-leaning conference called WeUnify. It's called the WeUnify conference. It was held in downtown Calgary. And I went to it. You know how I found out about it? I found out about it from the People's Party's Telegram channel. I voted for the PPCs this last election. I'm a huge fan of Maxime Bernier. I think he's a really good politician. Well, at the very least, I appreciate his views. And yeah, I was looking around for stuff to be a part of, some stuff to see what's going on, see what people are saying, see what sort of ideas are out there in the zeitgeist. What's going on in Canada, what's going on in the conservative scene. And so I see this advertisement for the WeUnify conference taking place in downtown Calgary, and it's got all these different names, all these different people that are going. They have tons and tons of speakers, and it's I can tell a lot of it's going to be like anti-vax stuff. A lot of it's going to be about COVID and stuff like that, which is par for the course. It's sort of to be expected. But really, the name that stood out on the list was Robert Malone. They got Robert Malone to come to this conference, and yeah, Robert Malone. He's the guy. He's the inventor of mRNA technology. He's the guy who coined the phrase mass formation psychosis. So, and he's a big deal. He's very lauded in sort of like this right wing sphere. So yeah, I wanted to. I didn't really know what all the speakers, what their deal was. There was a lot of them. There was a lot of people to look into. What I had hoped, what I kind of had in my mind, was that this WeUnify was about in the name, it was about unifying the right wing. And I didn't expect anything, too sort of fringe. Anything on the sort of the panels. They had 3 different days. It went from September, I believe, 19th to September 21st, and each different day they had stuff about freedom of speech, health. You know where that's going. Freedom, stuff like that, and they had one about sovereignty. They had a panel about sovereignty, and right away I was like, oh, that's about mass immigration. What else could that even be about? And we'll get into it. I was sorely mistaken, but yeah. So I head down there. I just picked one day. I couldn't do all 3 days. It was a little pricey. I forget the exact amount it was. It's a month ago now, but I remember tallying up all the expenses, and I was like, ooh, yeah, I could probably only do about one day. And I went into Sunday too, and I don't like going to conferences on Sundays. Anyways, yeah, so that's sort of what I had in my mind. I was thinking of a conference that like was conservative, right wing, and was going to talk about topical issues in the conservative movement. I wanted to hear something fresh. But I go to this conference and I got my suit on. I don't really know anyone there. I didn't really have a mind to like network or like talk to a lot of people. I just wanted to see what's up, what's going on, what are people saying, what are sort of like the ideas out there. Cause you'd be surprised. You think you have like a grasp on like a lot of different issues, but like when you listen to someone who sort of like specializes in a certain issue, who's like an expert on it, it actually is very like illuminating. Legal situations or like specificities and stuff like that. I was just interested, and right out of the gate, I go and I sit down. I'm a little late. It was I didn't get a lot of sleep. I drive down to Calgary and I get there, and right out of the gate, it's a guy going off about, this COVID was crimes against humanity. It was, we can never forget, we can never let it go. What else did he say? It's like, just the usual stuff that these people say, and then he gets, and I'm kind of just like drudging along. They're like, it's this typical just like libertarian, like, oh, a police state is coming, like, communism's right around the door, like this constant fear mongering, and like, detailing each step of the slippery slope to tyranny, all this stuff that you've heard a million times. But he throws in a little bone for me at the end. He goes, yeah, and by the way, in this country, we kill 100,000 children every year through abortion, and on top of that, we have, I think it's like 15,000, maybe even 16,000 a year euthanasia deaths, and that's, just goes to show you where the culture's at. This, same stuff, you kind of hear, culture of death, but I like that a lot more than just the droning on about tyranny and COVID and stuff like that. And and then he does a prayer, and I'm back on board. I'm sort of, I come in, I'm kind of like, oh, like, here we go. When I'm back on board, I'm like, okay, we'll see what this is about. We'll see what's going on here. And then it's like this health portion of the conference. It's like a segment on health or whatever. And it's like these guys get up there and they're just talking about nothing. They're just going on about like, we gotta fight back. We gotta resist tyranny. It's just all this like droning on and on. I just didn't find any of it compelling. Voice crack. I just didn't find any of it compelling. And then it gets better. These ladies come up and like they start going on. It's like they're just pushing like snake oil stuff. They're talking about like all these different medications and like your doctor is lying to you. You got to try this instead. It's like, where am I? I thought this was like a conservative conference. I thought we were going to talk about politics. I thought we were going to talk about the country. You're like, what is this, like an advertisement? And it's that all the time in this sphere. Like they go on about like food and stuff like that, all these like alternative medications, and it's just so tiresome. And I say this as someone who is very anti-vax, okay? Like I thought the COVID vax was poison. I did not take it. I paid a pretty hefty price for not taking it. I got kicked out of school. I was, there was the vaccine passports. I didn't give into that. And not saying it like that makes me, I know a lot of people didn't give into that. I'm just saying, like, I'm not some, like, vaccine cuck, okay? Like, I'm on your side on that thing. I'm anti-vax, but it's like, and I say this, the reason I bring it up, it's like, yeah, I got kicked out of school. I was getting, like, socially ostracized. You know the whole story. Like, we all lived through it. And even I'm saying, like, guys, give it a rest. Like, we gotta give it a rest. Like, it's over. COVID is over. It's been over. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, because, like, it was, like, an awful time, and, like, you're sort of, like, biting your nails about, like, it happening again. But dude, it's over. It's been like 4 years. Let it go. Let it go. We gotta let it go. And we gotta let it go, not because, like, oh, I'm sick of hearing it. I am. But, like, we gotta let it go because, as sort of, like, right-wing people, we have to be adapting with what's going on in the world. We can't be, like, stuck in the past, and, like, that is the past. And I get it. I know the whole, like, we gotta be watching out and making sure that never happens again. Fine. But, like, there's other things going on. Like, I feel like if they had another conference like this in 2026, 2027, we're going to be hearing the same stuff about, crimes against humanity, it wasn't safe and effective, whatever. It's all right. They convince people to wear masks and take gene therapy shots. It's like, I know, I'm right there with you, but, like, dude, I'm, like, 45 years old now. Can we move on? Can we talk about something else? And all this, trying to pushing all this, like, snake oil stuff, like, get that out of my face, honestly. I don't want to, I came here for politics. I'm not interested in buying, your like, health startup, you need some money. Like, I'm not some, I paid, like, good money to be here, to sit and listen to you talk, and you're advertising, like, pills, like, crazy pills to me. Like, I don't want to be part of that. Anyway. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of, like, complaining. A lot of these doctors they have, like, doctors on the stage, and they're complaining about how they got shut out of like, councils and whatever because they didn't agree with them on the vaccine. Okay, I'm really sorry for you. And anyway, and then they're going on and on, and then it gets to the point where we're talking about transgenders, and this is something that you're seeing a lot in these sort of, like, libertarian spaces. They're trying to, like, cozy up towards, like, social conservatives. They're trying to, like, talk about how they're Christian. They're fighting against this sort of, like, satanic force in the world. They're the ones with old school values. Like, it's sort of, and you can't really put your finger on it. You wonder if it's, like, paleo libertarianism, if that's even really a thing you can articulate. If it's sort of like a mixture of social conservatism and libertarianism, are we forming some sort of, like, coalition? That's what you would sort of believe. I know a lot of people, like, really devout Christians who are pro-life, and they're involved in a ton of other social conservative causes, and they start talking like libertarians. They start talking about, like, and a lot of them are very anti-vax. That's sort of just as part and parcel. But yeah, so they got on the stage, and, like, they're talking about all the new legislation from, like, Danielle Smith, saying that, like, schools can't, if a kid is, wants to be tranny or something, and you need parental consent, which is a step in the right direction. I think it's very bare bones, but definitely a step in the right direction, and I commend her. I know she's gotten a lot of flack from that from liberals, from left-wing activists. I know that she's sort of been thrown over the coals for that. But again, I think that's a little bare bones. But they were talking about sort of the lobbying power that they have, and how they're talking to different provincial people and sort of trying to get them on board with this sort of legislation. And I think that's great. Credit where it's due. I think that's a good thing. And I can't even remember. Are we still recording? Okay. Okay. I can't even remember which person or which organization it was. Forgive me for that, but voice crack. But yeah, and they're going on about this and talking about how we have to fight, and it's all this talk about fighting back and we got to stick together and stuff like that. Very bizarre how it's that is very this audience kind of understands what that means. Because usually you would think if you have all these different ideologies, all these different sort of sects of the sort of right wing in Canada, you would think you would have to very strongly define what you mean by we should stick together. Are you talking what factions are you talking about? But the thing is, what sort of unifies this coalition is the fact that it's not really welcome in the Conservative Party. So this, and this, we'll get into this, this conference, and I have my problems with it, it really makes you take a step back and go wow, this is considered fringe. Anti-vax, tranny stuff, this is considered, in Canada, this is considered fringe. This is considered, kind of out there, and which is horrifying to think about, but it's true. This is, and that's sort of when they say stick together. I was just so puzzled. I was are you talking to me? Because I'm not a libertarian, and I think all you guys are. So, but you're not saying that. You're not saying we libertarians should stick together. You're saying the conference is called WeUnify. Who are you talking about? Anyway. Yeah, so we start getting into the whole transgender stuff, and it's I just wonder, when are we going to get past what they say is, they get up there and they say, they talk about kids being trans, okay, and that's I think to anyone who is not straight up left wing, I think to anyone, I think even most liberals will tell you, that's not okay. That's children changing their gender is not a good thing, right? But then what perturbs me is that after what the speaker says, that she goes, this boy or this girl, I can't even remember, this boy, he changed his gender before he could even decide his sexuality. That's the thing, that's what we're so concerned about, is that this boy wasn't able to decide for himself if he wants to become a girl. And that's just not, and I just wonder when we're going to get past this whole do whatever you want, but just just don't push it in my face. You know what they say all the time about homosexuals and transsexuals? It's always just well, anyone, the individual can do whatever they want, just as long as you're not pushing it on my kids. It's okay, when are we going to get over this? This is just not, this is just not properly confronting what's happening in our culture. And I think there's a lot of pushback, actually, with the tranny issue in particular. But we got to go further than that. We got to say, like, listen, I think we can all, again, like I mentioned, like it's particularly disturbing when someone who is under the age of 18 decides to change their gender. Like, that's particularly because children can't properly discern, and you get these images of in your head of like someone, like a parent forcing that on kids, which happens. Like parents do that. They force this stuff on their kids. They sign them up for puberty blockers, or even more horrifying, the kid goes on some like different sort of forum or like Discord group or any sort of like online space. They get totally indoctrinated. They start going to these different places to get puberty blockers, and there is no parental consent required for that. Even worse, when they go to school, which is relevant to the legislation that we brought up, and then teachers start affirming their gender when the student says, I want you to call me something that I'm not. The teacher starts playing along and entertaining that delusion. I think we all know how disturbing that is. But the thing is, it's disturbing when someone who's over the age of 18 does it too. And just really think about, when someone decides to change their gender, when someone has severe gender dysphoria, they are mentally ill. They are like serious, they're spiritually sick, they are mentally ill, and they need help more than anything. They need a psychiatrist, they need a priest to talk to them, they need serious consoling. And it's, and when someone decides to really go off the rails, and they start cross-dressing, they start taking hormones, eventually when they sign up for a sex change operation, it's disturbing to me because I'm a Catholic, and I know that God creates us with a certain design for a certain purpose, and that has meaning. It's not like arduous. It's not something that is fluent. It's not something that you can just change on a whim. When you go through a sex change operation, voice crack, you're denying the way God made you, and that has serious ramifications for yourself. It's not good for someone to be denying who they are. And that sort of delusion needs to be addressed, and it has to be confronted with the truth. We have to tell the truth to these people. You are not, like, transgender people don't exist. And people get really upset when you say that. We gotta say that. We gotta say that transgender people don't exist. People have gender dysphoria. They get all caught up in different sort of what's the word for it? I forgot the word. Endocrine? Is that the word for your hormones? Your endocrine system? Their endocrine system gets out of whack through like porn addiction, horrible, like it even happen in your diet. Your estrogen can be spiking like crazy. It's just, or just through socialization. Like I mentioned, parents sometimes induce this stuff, or teachers. And my point is that if I can cut through my rambling a bit here, my point is that it's my worldview is not. Don't force that on people. If someone wants to make that decision for themselves, that's all right. That's not my worldview. My worldview is what is good for people. My worldview is right and wrong. And someone deciding to change their gender, this thing that's happening in our society where we have fluid gender, we have feminism, we have rampant pornography, acceptance of homosexuality, this is not good. This is not good for the society. It's not good for people. My worldview is the salvation of souls. That's my worldview as a Catholic. But again, that's not the worldview of a libertarian. The libertarian thinks that this is only bad when you're pushing it on children who can't discern. But the individual is supreme, which is, it's just not, that's not my worldview. We're fallen, we're imperfect. How could we be, as individuals, how could we be supreme? We have differences, we have differences in all different sorts of skills that we have. People are not interchangeable. Society needs to have order and needs to, we need to be truthful in what we're talking about, what we do in our lives. We have to be, in every aspect of our lives, trying to live in accordance with God's will. So that's my worldview, which is not congruent with this, just keep it behind closed doors, just keep it out of my face, which I think is honestly a very callous thing to say. And people repeat it. I know it's just like dogma at this point. People just repeat it all the time because that's just what they hear. But that's a very callous thing to say. Someone is, on their way straight to hell, and you don't care. You don't want to help them out. I just don't want to see it. What is that? I don't support that at all. Anyways, so they're going on with that, and at that point in the conference, I can just see where all this is going. Voice crack. I can just see where all this is going. It's just going to be, talking about pushing tranny stuff on kids and talking about anti-vax stuff, whatever. And again, isn't it so? Doesn't it really take you back? This is considered fringe in Canada. This is considered out there, and I'm just done. After they start going on like that. The guy who even introduced and I'm just kind of going on about this, but like the guy who introduced the transgender segment, he makes it, he really makes a note of to say before he gets into this, gender ideology, which is, they never want to say what it is, which is like sick people who have gender dysphoria. They want to talk about gender ideology. So it's not concrete. It's not something tangible. It's an abstraction. And they go on. He says, and he makes it's a very important clarification. People, they can do what they want if someone really decides to. They want to be something that they're not. That's okay, man. Just don't force it on people. It's like, do you think, I just get so, like, do you think that this is, like, I know, like, again, if this was said in Parliament, this would be like, whoa. But, like, do you think, like, in the right-wing sphere, when we have, like, complete free speech on Twitter, when we have, like, Rumble, and all these different platforms where people are saying, like, all different sorts of things, do you think that's, like, insane or something? That's, like, really boundary pushing to say that? You're, like, going against the grain? You talk to most liberal people, they'll probably agree with that, dude. Like, that's not, and it's all this organization. We come to this conference, everyone gets together, they pay all this money for all these speakers, and it's like we're not saying anything. We're not pushing the ball forward. There's not like a vision. There's not organization. It's just all this. And frequently throughout the conference, they're sort of like congratulating, how diverse, like, all the different people here are. It's like, if you want to have a political coalition, it actually can't be diverse. And when the PPCs, and I like the PPCs, and when the PPCs say, they say it's like a good thing that, like, you can come into this party and we'll be very tolerant of your views, it's because this party is like, the PPCs is like the not conservative party. That's what it is. Like, it's not because that's actually like a really good way to define a doctrine. It's because the PPCs are shoring up as many people as they can who don't fit inside the conservative party. It's not. Anyway, so I'm just, and it's hot in here. It's really hot in here. I'm getting angry. I'm going off. Anyway, I just get so tired of that. People like, they think they're really like pushing the boundary and they're just saying nothing. That's not like groundbreaking to go on about COVID and like don't transgender kids. Like, dude, what is this, like 2020? Anyway, yeah. So at that point, I just throw in the towel. I don't leave. I don't leave. I say, like, listen, I can't listen to this anymore. So they have these sort of exhibitor booths in the back, and I go back, and I'm looking at all these different booths, and it's all the usual stuff you'd expect to see at like a libertarian conference. It's the gun lobby. It's the PPCs. It's the Christian Heritage Party. It's all these different buy gold, which is just like all the time in these conservative conferences. Buy gold. You have to do this and do that. All the conservative schlock that you see, and then it's trying to remember. I go up to one of these booths and like I'm talking to like this lady, and it's just like they're talking about how they want to like start their own like organization for like their own like child health services. I didn't even get what they were talking about. I didn't even understand what they were telling me, to be honest with you. And I listened like their whole pitch, and I was, I signed up for their, because I like to be nice, I like to be polite, and I signed up for their newsletter, like, hey, keep it up, keep doing what you're doing. I had no idea what they were, what they were even about. It's just like the hug box stuff is just crazy. They come up to me and they're like, and the government can't be trusted to take care of our kids, so we gotta do it ourselves, right? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know, sure. But anyways, so and then I get to this one table, and it's like this, like, I look around, I'm like, oh, is this like the conspiracy literature table? I get sort of excited. They have all these books, and they have like 20 copies of this one book, and it's free. And I go, uh-oh. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. But I pick it up, and I'm looking at it, and it's that super awkward thing where like the vendor, where like the vendor like doesn't know whether or not to start a conversation with you or not, because like you're reading the book and maybe you're trying to read, and then they go like, hi, hi there, like, are you reading? Like, can I tell you what that book's about? So I just start the conversation with them. I'm asking them, and then so the book's free, and then this guy comes over to me, and like the book's about I can see on the front cover it says it's something about the Vatican, and I'm Catholic, so that piqued my interest, and I figure it's about how social standards. It's a book, I can tell right from the cover it's about like, changing political whatever. And I see Vatican, like my brain's just sort of like going to like the usual stuff, voice crack. I figure this is about probably something about declining social standards and whatever. But the guy comes over to me and he says, you got to pick up that book, you should take it. And read page whatever, and like it'll blow your mind or whatever. And I'm looking at it, and again it says something about like Vatican American relations. And I asked him, and I go like, and I'm just trying to be friendly, and I'm like, are you guys Catholic? And he goes, oh no, I'm not Catholic. And I go, okay. Well, the book is already in my hands. So I just take it, and I read what it's about. It's about, get a load of this. It's about how there is Vatican infiltration. Vatican infiltration in America. And you can trace all this back to when to when JFK, the first Catholic president, got elected back in 1960. And as soon as I read that, I walked out of the conference and I threw that book in the garbage. I literally took my copy of the book and I dumped it in the garbage where it belongs, okay? Vatican subversion in America, give me a break. Like, come on. Can we get real? Like, can we, like, you know, I can't even, I don't even, this episode's going to be like 3 hours if I really get into that. So anyways, I throw that piece of garbage in the garbage where it belongs, and I come back, I just don't want anyone to see me holding that. So I come back to the conference after having thrown out that book, and I'm just looking around. I'm looking at some of the other booths, and it's the Christian Heritage Party, it's the PPC, and I like the PPC. I know that they have a lot of libertarians in them, but I like the PPC. I voted for the PPC. And, you know, I voted for them because I don't want to vote for the conservatives. And I thought that they were actually trending to be more socially conservative. You know, famously back in 2019, they were the only party that was against mass immigration. And that's still the case. They're still the only party that's against mass immigration. And, you know, Maxine famously got, like, attacked during the, are we still rolling? I hope so. Anyways, sorry about that. Maxine famously got, like, attacked during, like, the 2019 leadership debate. They opened it up, the 2019 leadership debate, and they immediately just start attacking him because, like, they say he's a xenophobe, you know, and Jagmeet Singh gets up there and starts berating him. After Roe versus Wade got overturned in 2022, Maxine came out and he said that his party is totally open to pro-life candidates. He said that you know, he made it a part of the official PPC platform that they were going to be in favor of a viability ban. You know, and I'm fully pro-life. Abortion's always wrong, but we got to push it in the right direction, right? The conservatives don't have any books, the conservatives don't have any abortion law. Voice crack. But the PPCs do. The PPCs are for a viability ban, and so I'm thinking, like, you know, these guys are getting really socially conservative. I support this. You know, all their sort of, like, youth leaders are talking about immigration. They're talking about social issues like LGBT, abortion, things like that. I go, okay, like, this is my party. Like, this is, like, music to my ears. The foreign policy is great too. You know, I support you know, they're just saying all the stuff I like. But again, there's still, like, this libertarianism that's in the party. And that's where you get sort of like this thing where it's like, okay, we're going to get all these people in the right wing that are not welcome in the Conservative Party, and we're going to bring them together. And it's like, you know, there's competing factions now in this already very small party. And yeah, so, like, and again, like I mentioned, like, a social conservative, a Catholic like me, voice crack, we have a very different worldview than a libertarian, so there's a clash there. So yeah, if there's any, you know, people from the PPC that are watching this that, like, are thinking, you know, this is still what people want, this is still what young people want, maybe is a better way to frame that. You know, I went to this conference and I thought it sucked. I thought it, you know, I was bored out of my mind. I thought people were just, it was like a rally for Reagan in, like, 1982. Like, it's just all the same talking points. And, like, really, like, the thing I want to get to, you know, and they're talking about guns, they're talking about, you know, private health care, which I think is, like, a crazy, they're really proud of that stance. They think it's really controversial. They're talking about the vaccine, they're talking about low taxes and all this, you know, all the rest. And it's like, if you're a property owner if you're a property owner, if you own a lot of property, if you own a business, I get why this is compelling. If you were really hit hard with like the vax stuff, I get why this is compelling. Like, I get why libertarianism is compelling. Voice crack. I get why it's compelling. Because we live in sort of like this, like Sam Francis said this, we live in sort of like this anarcho-tyranny, and there is a tyranny aspect to it where it's like, you feel like you can't say what you think, you can't, you're getting like constant taxes, you can't make any money, and you want to like be free to sort of manifest your own destiny. I get why that's attractive. I get why the sort of libertarian thing is attractive. But again, like, and gun rights, I'm pro-gun. I like guns. I like, and I think, we should probably have, the taxes should be lowered. Private health care, I mean, sure. I don't, again, and again, if you're like an elderly, to me, I'm a young guy. That doesn't, private health care, that issue doesn't really stir me up. But if you're like a boomer or something, I get why that's a big issue for you. I just don't have strong feelings on it. So again, I get why libertarianism is compelling for people, but it's just not for me. And again, you really lose me when you start saying all this stuff about like, it's okay as long as you like leave me alone, and like all this sort of, it's really like the radical individualism. That's really where you lose me, because like, tell you the truth, and this is my biggest problem with this conference, isn't that kind of what's wrong with our society right now? Don't we kind of have too much individualism? And they talk about this, they talk about freedom and liberty. It's like, a lot of people kind of have too much freedom. A lot of people, like a lot of society right now is like, there's no social fabric. There's no like binding together. And I know I'm sort of like just preaching to the choir right now, but it seems like these guys don't get it. Freedom just for like freedom's sake and all this stuff. I know for like a lot of people right now, this is so trite, me bringing this up. But again, it's like these guys don't get it. These guys are like, just talking about like liberty and like, and all this stuff. It's like, I think we actually need some order. We need some rules actually in this society. I kind of think the government should exist for things. Call me crazy. I kind of think the government should actually like have like a doctrine that's good for its people. Whatever, if it's a bit overarching, like that's not keeping me up at night. Anyways, yeah, and I'll get into why that ideology is really pernicious. But again, it's just like, and this is just with everything conservative, like, and I'm really harping on like the, going on about the COVID stuff. Like, dude, it's over. And like, it gets worse. They start going on about like communism, talking about like Soviet republics and stuff like that. It's like, dude, it's over. The Berlin Wall fell. The Soviet Union collapsed. It's over. It's been over. I'm just so sick of this, just going on about like, it's always like, this is just not relevant to what's going on in our world. Like, can we talk about what's actually happening in our country? The guy mentions like 100,000 babies being killed every day, or pardon me, every year. It's 300 every day in our country. Can we talk about that? Can we have a discussion about that? Can we have a segment, a speaker that's about pro-life? And people are killing themselves. These elderly people, they get these diagnoses, they get these sort of like, life gets hard when you get old, and they just want these doctors to kill them. That's where our culture is at. That's the decisions that people are making, and your ideology is not really, it's not actually properly opposing that. Do you know what I mean? Once more, can we talk about how the country is dramatically, and this is like, I know this is like radioactive to talk about. People don't like when you talk about this subject. But can we talk about how the country is changing demographically? I know that is like radioactive. I know that's really like that makes people uncomfortable. Yeah, it makes people uncomfortable. That's why we should talk about it. That's why we should have a conversation about it. We have a lot of immigrants coming into this country right now, and if we're talking about things like identity, sovereignty, are these people that are coming in, are they interchangeable with the native Canadians? Can they assimilate? People people on the left, and honestly, consistently, people in the middle are saying maybe they just shouldn't assimilate. And again, if you're a libertarian, if you believe in all this radical individualism, well, do you even really have a basis for wanting someone who's coming into this country to assimilate? Do you even have a basis for saying that Canada should have an identity? And a lot of these people, these conversations, all of this organization, all these people come together, and these conversations just aren't being had. And once more, can we talk about the fact that there is war on, there is war on every single continent? We have a hot war in Eastern Europe that is showing no signs of slowing down. Trump's got in, he can't stop it, It's the deadliest war on the European continent since World War II. Can we talk about that? Can we talk about, what's our position on that? Can we have a debate about it? Can we talk about, is Trump doing a good job? Is the NATO alliance doing a good job? How about, the fact that the entire Middle East is on fire? And how about, if we're going to go on about free speech, can we talk about how the fact that this is like the #1 story in the news for the past 2 years, and you can't talk about it. You can't talk about it without some crazy Zionist trying to get you canceled. You can't talk about it without some crazy left-wing, sort of like militant Antifa type trying to ruin your life from that side either. You have to walk on eggshells when you're talking about this issue. It's got to be one of the most tense, issues that I've ever seen. #1 story in the news every day. Can we have a conversation about it? We're supposed to be about freedom of speech. Can we have a conversation about it? What's our stance on what's happening in the Middle East? And once more, now America wants to go to war in Venezuela. They want to kill Maduro. Can we have a conversation about that? And these are the things that are actually happening in our country. Abortion, mass immigration, war. This is actually relevant stuff. And that's always my problem with the conservative movement. It's always just stuck in the past. I know there's a lot of there's kind of some irony to that, but it's there has to be some forward momentum. We have to be pushing the envelope. There has to be a doctrine. There has to be some actually compelling. They talk about why aren't kids involved in the conservative movement? It's because it's freaking boring. It's because nothing's going on. Everything's just complaining about being called racist. Everything's about just going on about. Again, they're talking about communism. They're talking about the same talking points about the Marxist plot and always this fear mongering about a totalitarian 1984. Give it a rest. Honestly, just get over yourself. That stuff's not compelling anymore. To anyone who's over the age of 30, it's not compelling. Anyways, it's hot in here. I'm angry. I'm pissed off. But I'll try not to lose my cool too much. And again, can we talk about another thing? Can we talk about the fact that on September 10th we had the most significant political assassination since Bobby Kennedy? This was I was so shocked. I thought okay, libertarians have got to at least have the sort of the sense to know they got to talk about this, right? Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck, publicly executed on a Utah university on September 10th by a crazy left-wing nutjob. That's at least, I know, okay, I know that's contentious. Some people, there's conspiracies about that. I'll say something we know for sure though. That happened, and there was tons and tons of left-wing people who posted videos on TikTok and Instagram and wherever of themselves celebrating that he got shot in the neck. A father, a generative individual who actually contributed to America, who contributed to the zeitgeist, contributed to free speech, who was a Christian, who proclaimed the name of Jesus Christ on these campuses, had 2 little children and a wife, 31 years old, got shot in the neck, publicly executed. And there was choruses, and it wasn't all of them, I won't say that. Like, there was liberals, for sure, who denounced the violence, but there was a worrying amount of them who did not, and who celebrated. That's the state of the discourse. That's the state of what's happening in our world, where you have these radical left-wing people who literally want to see conservatives dead. They literally have bloodlust. They don't have any sense of charity or forgiveness to conservatives or right-wing people. That's not right. And we have got to have a conversation about that. And it was like a footnote. They played some videos, they honored him and whatever. No, Robert Malone gets up. And he says he's wearing, black to commemorate Charlie Kirk, whatever. And the thing that really perturbed me, and I know that Robert Malone, a lot of people like him. He's a very sort of he's very polite and soft-spoken and whatever. But he gets up there and he starts going on. And he says that the reason why Charlie Kirk was shot was because he stood up for free speech. Okay, come on. Free speech? The people who are celebrating his death, the people who are what's the word? They take such satisfaction in seeing him get killed. They feel that way because Charlie Kirk stood up for Christian morality. Charlie Kirk was pro-life. He proclaimed the name of Jesus Christ on these campuses, like I said. And, anti-trans, anti-all that stuff. That's what animated the bullet, actually. It wasn't because of free speech. I don't know, have these people ever even talked to a liberal person? A lot of liberal people aren't against free speech. They're against being anti-gay. They're against being pro-life. They're against having Christian themes in the country. That's what they're against. And it's offensive that they won't talk about that, because it just suits their sort of ideology, their libertarian ideology, that it is about, it's about, free speech and all the rest. It's like, dude, read the room. Anyways, and this is what I really want to highlight about what, because Robert Malone, he goes on and he starts talking about euthanasia in Canada. He starts talking about euthanasia. And that's a very important subject. And a lot of pro-lifers actually voted for the Conservative Party because they want to stop Bill C-7. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with voting for the Conservative Party, but and that's just my opinion. But they're very perturbed about Bill C-7, and Bill C-7 is this new expansion to euthanasia. It's had a real rigmarole trying to get through, trying to get passed. It's basically this expansion in euthanasia in Canada where they want to open up euthanasia, medical aid and dying services for the mentally ill. So if you are suffering from, so basically they're treating depression, suicidal tendency, any sort of medical, bipolar, stuff like that. They're treating that as a justification for, as a diagnosis that is incurable, with or pardon me, I won't say that, not incurable. They're treating it as like a justification for euthanasia. Okay, plain and simple. So that's the state of that matter, and Robert Malone starts to touch on this, and he talks about how they're rolling this out, and he talks about utilitarian medical ethics, and he was very proud of this phrase that he comes up with. He says it a lot during the speech and during the panel that he was on, and he starts going on about how like they're getting to the point where the government and the medical community, of course when libertarians can't isolate something that's going on to the government, it has to be another centralized, faceless abstraction. The medical community, the medical establishment, whatever. It's just so tiresome. But he talks about how they're basically rolling this out, and how like the government is deciding that like you're not worthy of life. You're not. It's utilitarian because they're deciding, what's best for like the whole country. They're deciding that like as soon as you get to a certain point, as soon as you get to a certain age, you're unfit. Is incoming with a totalitarian medical regime. If you're not of a certain caliber of human, you're no good. We're getting rid of you. And really, and he's going on about this, and really the problem I have with it, like I mentioned, is that I can see a lot of Christians, pro-lifers, religious people, I can see them listening to what he's saying and finding it compelling. And what's so pernicious is that there is truth in what he's saying. There is truth that there is this radical element in the Liberal Party, definitely the NDP, that is like affirmatively pro-euthanasia. We should force it in a certain sense, like these hospitals, and you hear a lot of these stories about how doctors are very pushy with it and things like that, and sort of highlighting the sort of societal positives of euthanasia. Like if someone's, and of course it's very offensive to the sanctity of life, it's very offensive to Christians, but really my problem with it is that like, yeah, there's truth in that stuff exists, but it's not the most prevalent factor. And again, it's always this conversation of like things are getting bad. It's getting bad. It's not a reflection on like how bad things already are. You know what I mean? Because if a Christian came on the stage and said something to the effect of, if a Christian said something like this, if a Christian said, in the same way that when a couple bears a child, when a couple is fortunate enough to participate in the act of creation, they are experiencing a reflection of God's love. The love that they have for their children, it helps them understand the love that God has for them, because we are children of God. And in the same way you can say about suffering is that suffering exists, it's part of our lives, it's part of the deal. Life's not fair, things are unequal, it's baked into the cake. And the purpose of it, why it's meaningful and not just and not arduous, is because God is showing us the sacrifice, especially now in the time after Jesus. God is helping us understand the sacrifice on the cross. And so that's to say that when we experience, spontaneous suffering in our world, we are understanding the sacrifice that God made for us. And just in that same breath, suffering helps us understand love as well. Because in order to understand what's good, you have to understand what's bad. In order to understand, Christians, we believe in God and we believe in the devil. And so there's meaning in all of it. None of it is, none of it is unserious or anything like that. Everything has meaning. The universe is created with intelligent design, and that's meaningful. And so on top of that, we come into this world without our own sort of consent, without our own sort of individual making of ourselves. God brings us into this world, and God also takes us out of this world. We have a natural death, we have a natural destiny, and our lives actually aren't our own. We belong to God. Our bodies, and the classic thing that the pro-choice side always says, my body, my choice. No, it's God's body. We belong to Him. And yeah, so our lives aren't our own, and so you have no right actually to take it away. You have no right to kill yourself. You know, we can talk about all these different things, assisted suicide, medical aid in dying, euthanasia, all the different intricacies. It's all suicide. It's all this nihilistic, sort of hopeless, you know, frankly selfish reflection on your existence that you can just opt out of life. You can just throw your life away as if it didn't even mean anything. That's BS, actually. We cannot tolerate that kind of thing happening in our society. You have no right to kill yourself. And so, if someone said something like that, you can see how that sounds a lot different than fear-mongering about utilitarian medical ethics. You know, and you reflect on that, and you go like, yeah, if someone actually went up there and started saying something like that, something very, very Christian, something very, dogmatic, very, very illiberal, saying that you don't have a right to do something within your own sort of periphery, you don't have a right to harm yourself, that's very illiberal. To say something like that, the people there in this, conference, I think about, they're probably going to have a problem with that. They're probably going to say, well, that guy's a bit out there. I don't know about that one. I don't know about that guy. He sounds a bit crazy. He sounds a bit off his rocker. And you just have to reflect on that. And that's really, if there's going to be any sort of coalition between social conservatives and libertarians, this sort of conflict has to be addressed. If we actually want to bring forth a regime that is against all of the degeneracy that we see in our society, the porn, the abortion, the LGBTQ, all the rest, I honestly think these people are going to be the first ones in our way. These people are going to be the first ones saying that, like, that's, it's just, individuals make their choices, and, like, you can't, they're going to start telling us about how, like, we're forcing our beliefs on people and how that's not okay. Actually, anyways. So that's my reflection on his speech. Again, he can say, we gotta stop being so, like, enamored by little breadcrumbs of, like, oh, he said a little thing that's pro-life. Do you know the type of political will that is required to actually getting these clinics to close, to actually stopping legislation like Bill C-7 from getting through, from actually, like, lamenting that our suffering has purpose, and getting rid of this selfish sort of, and you know what, that people are in tough situations. I have sympathy for the type of stuff that people go through. Let's get real though, a lot of the stuff that people are talking about like, it's too hard, I need to get an abortion, I need to kill myself, I want to do IVF, I want to go off the rails, and, like, all of my transgressions have to be addressed, I'm so important. It's selfish, it's prideful, and it's not good for our country, and it's not good for people. It's sending them straight to hell. And we have to tell the truth on that and address it. So yeah, that was his speech. That was Robert Malone's speech. I didn't like it. Seems like a common theme throughout this conference. And also, Maxine gets up and talks about how you should vote PPC, and then the gun lobby guy comes up and starts counter-signaling him. The Conservatives are the only ones who are going to win the election. I'll save that for another episode. I'll save that discussion for another episode. I don't hate the Conservatives, but I did not vote for them last election. Anyways, and they closed the night. With like wargaming how Alberta is going to separate and we're going to have no taxes and it's going to be so freaking coolio, yo. It's going to be so freaking freedom this, freedom that. I'm just, at that point I couldn't take it. I walked out. I can't take that. I cannot. And look, however you feel about Alberta separation, we're not going to be paying taxes. Like, they literally said, like, once Alberta separates, we're not going to be paying taxes. I mean, come on. What is this? Like, can you give me a break? So anyway, yeah, just dreadful. And this is, again, like I mentioned, this is my problem. This is my problem with the whole ordeal, is that this conference did not properly, and just libertarianism in general, does not properly address what's happening in our country, what's happening in our civilization. Maybe if you're a bit older, maybe if you're a boomer or something like that, some of these talking points resonate with you. I can tell you, everyone who's like an activated conservative and who's like under the age of 30, none of this stuff resonates with them. None of this stuff resonates with them. It's not out there, it's not hip or cool. It's just like, this is like a Reagan rally. This is like a Reagan rally. It's not cool. It's not saying anything fresh or new. Talking about Marxists and stuff like that, like, dude, if you actually knew what Marxism was, you really wouldn't find a lot that you disagree with. Like, come on. And that's the truth. And I mean like the social theory of Marxism, not the economic theory. Of course, the economic theory they strongly disagree with. I'm talking about the social theory of Marxism. So anyway, trying to think. I don't know if I have really much else to say about it. Again, pleading to anyone in the PPC. I'm saying this, and I don't speak for everyone. As like a young person, I really don't see. There was like a couple other younger girls there. They're probably just there with their fathers or something. I was like the youngest guy there. Again, this stuff just isn't compelling. This stuff, freedom this and freedom that, it's just not compelling. It's not what this country needs right now. And if you liked it, that's fine. I'm just expressing myself. I'm making this show now, and like, I don't know, I'm just getting tired of like every single conversation I have with people. Like, every time I say something that they like slightly disagree with, they're like want to cut my head off. So I don't know. Maybe this show isn't a good idea, but I just can't help myself. I gotta talk. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the WeUnify conference. I can't really think of anything else to say. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Sorry about the poor audio quality and the poor lighting quality. Again, we're still in the testing phases here at FutureCast. We're still ironing out the bugs and everything. But I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have a great evening. Bye for now.